Hello, everybody, and welcome to 3 Point Perspective, the podcast about illustration, how to do it, how to make a living at it, and how to make an impact in the world with your art. I'm Jake Parker.
I'm Lee White.
And I'm Will Terry. All three of us are professional illustrators, and for about the last 25 years, we've all worked with just about every major publisher in the business. And together, we've published somewhere around 50 books, and we've all taught illustration at universities.
Yep. Each week, we're going to come at you with a different topic. Sometimes we're going to argue. Sometimes we're going to agree. But each time, you're going to learn something brand new, I hope.
Yeah, I think each time somebody does learn something new. Sometimes that's even me.
Is there another option between arguing and what was the other one?
Agreeing. That's pretty much so a continuum there.
Somewhat
through a curveball.
Somewhat disagree.
You went existential.
Each week we're going to somewhat disagree, somewhat agree. I don't know if you can hear this, but Will Terry's smiling. And tell us why you're smiling, Will Terry.
I got a good night's sleep last night.
No.
I know.
He launched his Kickstarter today, and it funded in an hour, 1 hour. That's incredible.
And unfortunately, by the time you're listening to this, it's probably ended.
And maybe we can adjust it. Now,
Yeah, because we've got a little backlog of...
Will's goal was only $10. So...
No, his goal was $6,000, and he had a little bet going with his team of Kickstarter people that he put together to make this Kickstarter. They had a bet going that if he funded in under an hour, they would owe him lunch, and if it was over an hour, he would owe them lunch.
And it really came down to the last 5 or 10 seconds.
It was intense.
That's a bold move, though. That's a huge bet.
It just tells you how much faith he has and how much.
No, actually, lunch is cheap, so
that's a good point.
Yeah,
but I'm really impressed. I'm really impressed with what's going on here, and it makes me want to try to do a Kickstarter the right way moving forward. So we'll see. I'm watching this closely.
Well, I am running an ongoing playlist on YouTube on how to run a six-figure Kickstarter, so we'll see. It was a bold statement because I locked myself into six figures, so we'll see.
And you can't put $50,000 on your credit card right at the last minute either.
I think there's actually a limit. You can't back a project at more than $10,000 or something like that.
Oh, really?
And that's based on what I did during my Kickstarter. So
if I make it within 90,
there's that rule for a reason.
So I just have to get 90% there. Is what you're saying?
That's true.
90%. No. Tell everybody really quick what your Kickstarter is for. What your Kickstarter?
It's for a pop culture character book of some of my favorite characters, and I draw them as they're little kids. If you haven't ever seen them, you can actually check out what I'm doing on my website at willterry.com. I feel gross, like I'm pitching constantly.
Oh, get over yourself.
Yeah, that's the Kickstarter month. The whole month feels that way.
I know, but we're in good shape, and we have a great podcast today.
What is our podcast today?
Oh, go ahead, Jake.
I was just going to say you should change your Twitter handle. That's a hard thing. Change your Twitter handle to Will Terry back my Kickstarter instead of Will Terry.
Oh,
I like it.
Whatever. Okay, what are we talking about today, Will?
So,
moving on.
This podcast has a title, but we don't know what it is yet. But you do if you're listening to this because there's a title up there. But we're going to name this one after the fact. How meta is that?
That's pretty meta.
Now you're wasting my time.
I don't know what to call this. So I know that we will come up with a good title, but we don't have it right now.
Well, what's the topic?
Get into the discussion.
Okay, here's the deal. I have 3 really good emails from people that follow us and our SVSLearn.com students. And I think they all fit together because these people are all asking how to become better at their craft and at as a children's book illustrator. So they have some very specific questions, and I thought we would there's 3 of them, and I thought we would answer them. And I also thought it'd be interesting.
Okay, I'll let you finish. Go ahead.
That's going to be.
And then I'm butting in.
You're going to say something negative, and if I filibuster, you can't do it. So it's going to be awesome, and you're going to learn a lot, and you guys are going to have some good things to say. So,
and I'm going to say, title of the podcast's "How to Become a Better Children's Book Artist."
It's so general,
but that's what it is.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe that's the title right now.
Okay.
Working title.
I'm just saying we shouldn't get hung up on the title anyways. We could just get right into the discussion.
No, we can't, because it's Will's topic. We're going to spend about 10 more minutes doing this little dance.
Ouch.
That's true. I'm just glad we know what we're talking about now.
I still don't know what we're talking about.
I'm going to start reading this email, and you guys are going to listen to it, and Jake's going to drop something.
I just dropped my webcam.
Oh,
classy.
Well, luckily, we don't need that for a podcast. Okay, so there's some really nice compliments, and I'm going to skip those because they're self-aggrandizing, right? And then I'm going to get to the part where this person says, "To cut to the chase, I'm a young illustrator writer who recently signed."
But enough about your good looks, Will Terry. Here's my question.
Signed on with a literary agent last summer, and I'm going to not mention the literary agent. And let's see. I know that writing and illustrating picture books is insanely challenging, but for a terribly shy person like myself, the most nerve-wracking aspect of children's literature is not the act of writing and illustrating, but school visits and public speaking in general. Dun, 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 dun. Since middle school, my goal was to be a children's book writer and illustrator, but even back then, I dreaded the thought of speaking to hundreds of kids or adults and visits and speaking engagements. In your experience, do publishers require illustrators and authors to do school visits and speaking conferences? So you guys have a crack at it.
All right. I'll go first.
Okay. Wait, was there a question in there? What's the question?
Do you have to speak? If you're a children's book illustrator, am I going, I'm petrified of speaking?
Well, no, you don't.
Because the reason is this one was heartfelt because I used to be petrified of speaking. I mean, it probably doesn't seem like that now because I have a YouTube channel and I have spoken at lots of different colleges and SCBWI conferences around the country. I spoke to the CTA with 1,000 people there. I just gave a talk to librarians, and I'm giving a talk this weekend to another group of librarians for the whole state of Utah. And I'm not even bothered in the least. And I never thought I could get there because so my heart would start pounding out of my chest when I was young if I had to teach a lesson or something at church in front of people. If I had to do anything in front of a class at school, if I would be going along, and I'm talking, this is like 3 weeks or a month in the future, and the thought would hit my brain and I would have a panic attack about speaking. And I know some of you that are listening have felt this.
I like how you asked us to answer and we started and you're like,
screwing it up. So I had to.
You didn't give me a chance.
Jake, what do you think? Do you have to speak? And if so, to what capacity?
So I've done 10, maybe I should really sit down and count how many children's books I've done, but published project books through a publisher, we're reaching 15 now for me. And I have done school visits for one book in particular, where I did a handful of school visits, and that was completely optional. They came to me and they said, "Would you be up for doing this? Is this something you're interested in?" I have no problem speaking in front of a group of people. It doesn't bother me. It sort of sucks the energy out of me, but I'm not afraid to do it. I just need to recuperate afterwards. But I said, no, that's no problem. Whatever it takes to sell the book, I'm happy to do it. But it was completely optional. They put the ball in my court with that, and honestly, I don't know how many more books that sold. It was a total of maybe 6 different schools I went to. Not every kid bought a book. Not every kid, actually spent money on it. So at the end of the day, I sometimes wonder how important a school visit is for the sale of the book. I think if it's a part of your business plan where you're doing 50 visits in a year and you're pushing hard for the book sales, and you've got a whole line of books to sell, so there's something for everybody. But I think a one-time thing for a book, I don't know if it's that effective, and I don't think it's something you should worry about, or should be something to inhibit you from pursuing a career in children's books.
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic, because some people make a huge amount of their yearly income from this kind of thing. They get booked at, like, they'll fly out of state, they'll go to, say, to Texas or something, and then they'll plan, 6 or 7 different schools, and they're all in a row, and they're all sequential, and they're getting paid from each one, and and they make a lot of money. I mean, I've had a couple of meetings with people when I lived in Portland who did that exclusively. They come out with a book, and the whole next year spent sort of touring the book. And it was a great business model. They made a good amount per day, and they'd stack a couple of schools on top of each other on the trip. And it was great. For me, I'll tell you guys a story. Well, Will and Jake already know this story, but I'll tell everybody the story. We tried to get we tried to get a teacher, an illustrator, to come do a video at SVS. And he said no. And the reason he said no was really, really smart. And I think about this all the time now. He said, I'll come, and it'll take me, I'll plan to do like a 2 or 3 hour video, but that will take me like a month or 2 to get ready for it. I'll be practicing it every day. I'll rewrite it. I'll redo the script. And just like, it takes so much time to prep it, that he's like, I've learned that I just don't have the capacity to do that kind of stuff. And I tend to fall along that line now when I agree to go do an SBWI speech or something like that. I've spoken at a bunch of them, and they're exhausting. There's almost no amount of money, in my opinion, that makes up for how exhausting that is. When I'm trying to move a book forward, or I'm trying to paint and be an artist, it tends to zap all that out of me. And I'm a comfortable speaker. I like people, and I like talking, obviously. So I don't know. It's a mixed bag for me. I don't think the payoff is there.
Well, I think you sort of answered the question too, in that if you take 2 months to prepare a presentation, but then you're able to give that presentation 50 times,
right? That's
100 times, then it pays off. Then it's worth it. But a one time or 2 times.
Great point.
And to spell his name, it's got like every consonant in the alphabet. Bedricki, Biedrz.
Oh, the guy that does that.
And he does school visits almost every day of the school year. He's that's part of his business plan. Same with Jerry Pelota. And I actually illustrated one of Jerry's books. And the thing is, I guess we're just giving information on ways to consider. We're not necessarily answering if you have to speak, but maybe we're talking first about the benefits of it. I mean, his average, I did a podcast with him on my YouTube channel, and his average payment for a day, I believe, is around $1,500.
Yeah, that's about what I heard. And you can get that multiple days in a row. So the amount actually goes up quite a bit.
So,
it's a nice little chunk.
So he's done it long enough now that his wife does all of his bookings and all of his airfare and hotels and all. So they work as a team. She works from home. He goes out on the road. And he goes to other countries. And he's actually worked his way up to where he's marketing to go back to schools that he visited 3 to 5 years ago. So he's hitting some of the same ones, the ones that know him, the ones that have paid really well. And I mean, aside from selling books at each school, his publishers want to work with him. And Jerry is the same way. Jerry Pelota is the same way. And I'm sure there's a ton of authors and illustrators that are doing this sort of thing. But, the publisher wants to work with someone like that because there's no risk involved in them publishing their books. They're going to sell the minimum requirement in volume to break even. So there's almost no risk at all for a publisher to continue to publish these people's books. So from that standpoint, if you're willing to go that route, and it's not an easy thing to start up, but I know that these guys make a lot of money.
Well, I have a question to you guys about, I mean, when I do books, I have a lot of requests from bookstores, and I'd love to go speak at the bookstores and do a little presentation and meet and greet and stuff. But it just seems like that is a big lopsided investment where I get nothing.
Yeah, you have to decide who you are. I don't personally, I don't like to travel that much. And so I wouldn't want that life. Other people love to be on a plane and have figured out a way to work while they're out and be able to get their exercise and keep their routine. It's not for me, and it sounds like it's not for you, Lee.
I just have a problem with it because when I do a book, I turn in the book and then it's 6 months later minimum before that book comes out, and then by that point I'm already on to some other project, a book or whatever it's going to be, and then the idea to stop all of that just to go travel to a bookstore where they're not paying a school. I should explain to you guys, if you don't already know, that a school visit you get paid for typically. At a bookstore, typically you don't. And so, to not get paid but then pay for your own travel and all that stuff, it just doesn't seem to make good business sense to me.
I have found that book signings at bookstores, for me, now there are exceptions to this rule. Brian Lee's is one of those exceptions. I've not been able to make them worth the time. I feel like book signing, we're getting off topic, but that's what this podcast is. Let's call this podcast This and That so we don't get off topic. I haven't been able to make them profitable. You sell 10 books in 2 hours, and with your royalty cut at 50 to 75 cents a book, you get $7.
You made enough for lunch.
Maybe enough for lunch. And with the publishing, the leveraging of the publishing machine, it's just not that's not how books are sold, Yeah. So, and I think book signings work for the famous, but I don't think they work for the up and coming person. But
I guess to shimmy back to our topic a little bit, if you do this job and you start to get work, at some point you will get asked to speak publicly. So the question is, do I need to be able to speak publicly? And the answer, I think, to that is yes. You need to get comfortable. Go to, there's different organizations that can teach you how to speak in public at least a little bit more comfortably and plan. Toastmasters, there you go. But I don't even know if that's still in business. I remember that was like a long time ago, but if they're still in business, look them up. But you will be asked to speak in public. You'll be asked to teach, or you'll be asked to present. Or we get those offers all the time. And
it's interesting. Have you ever seen I've seen editors shaking. I shouldn't laugh, but they're up at the podium giving a keynote, and their knees are knocking. And you're like,
heck yeah,
you're the editor of HarperCollins. You're one of the big editors, and I've only seen this a few times because most of them are actually pretty good. But I think for me, the way you get good at it, the way you get comfortable, is to just start saying yes to every opportunity where you can be in front of people. And exposure therapy, I want you to know, I was that guy who hated it. And I still remember, I could barely speak when I was chosen to be the illustrator of the year for the California Teachers Association. And so I had to go around and speak. And one of the talks that I gave was in front of every single representative from every district. And I think every district had multiple representatives. So there was 1,000 people in a ballroom.
Wow.
I can tell you 1,000 people is, when you're up on the stage, is bigger than you ever thought it would be. And I had to give a little speech, and I was up, I woke up at 4 a.m. and couldn't get back to sleep. It was bad. And that was probably 10 years ago. And today I've spoken so much since then that it's just not a big deal.
I still get really nervous before a speech, but one benefit that we have going for us that other professions don't maybe is I always show work. I'm a visual person and I like to show images. And so I always just kind of divert the attention, like, look over there. There's some shiny stuff over there. And then, and so it, typically the room darkens and everybody's looking up at the screen and I'm good to go at that point. But where I get nervous is if there's no visuals and it's just me and a microphone. At the SCPWI event in San Francisco that I spoke at, there was an impromptu, unplanned thing where we had to introduce ourselves to the audience. And it's just a podium up there. There's no images. And I wasn't even ready for this. And man, I don't know what I said. I just kind of started rambling and it was, I was really nervous. I got kind of tunnel vision while I was up there. It was really funny because I'm comfortable speaking, but I hadn't planned on this one. So, it still happens.
Do you have a recording of that?
I think I started meowing. Cat.
I got another angle here. And that is, I think the best advice is the advice that makes you a better person in the end, and a more experienced person, and a person who's more capable. So, if you feel like public speaking is not something you're good at or something you're afraid of, do whatever you got to do. Train yourself. Get tutorials or get a coach or something so that you can speak in front of a crowd. And one of the things that's going to help you there, I think, is really believing in your work and doing work and taking jobs that there is a passion there for. And so oftentimes you could talk to people, you see people speak who are terrified of speaking, but because they believe so much in what they're talking about, they're willing to sidestep that fear to get that message out. And so, maybe it isn't that you you're passionate about puppy dogs and you did a book about puppy dogs, but maybe you are passionate about creativity and that a kid can grow up and become an artist if they love to draw, and that these, roadblocks that are in their way right now, where a parent might say, you can't make any money as an artist, or a teacher might, there might be a bad teacher in that child's way that says, you have to get a real job, you have to go off and do something else. You might be the one voice that says to that kid, no, this is a viable option. This is something you can do. And that can be a driving force to get you to overcome some of these fears. There's another thing too, and that is being a creative person, having the opportunity to actually draw for a living is such a rare opportunity when you compare it to every other job that's out there and every other person who doesn't get that opportunity. That it's kind of, I think, selfish to say, I just get to create and I don't have to hawk my stories. I don't have to hawk my wares as an artist, and I'm just going to leave that to everybody else. I think it's two sides of the same coin. You create and then you also share. You create and you share it with people. And sharing with people, part of it's public speaking if it comes to that, but also part of it is I've got to promote myself. I've got to share my work and show people why it's good. Not everybody's going to be an advocate for you and for your art style and for your stories. And if no one else is going to do it, that burden falls upon you. And if you're not going to do it, then it's not going to happen. So I would just look at it as that way. One, somebody needs to hear your message. And two, no one's going to hear it if you don't start doing it yourself.
And to add to that, there is a person in you that is really good at public speaking. You have to have faith that that person is down in there and that you haven't developed that person. Because, were you guys naturally good at public speaking?
Mm-mm.
No, terrible.
I'm still not that good. Does this count as public speaking?
Not really. Okay. when you have the audience out there, there's something that happens. It's like, I don't want to make people.
There's actually a really good book. I'm just going to straight up interrupt you there, Will. There's a really good book I recommend called Perennial Seller. It's by Ryan Holiday. It's the art of making and marketing work that lasts. And the first half of the book is about how do you make a book that stands the test of time, that isn't dated in 10 years? What goes into it? How do you look at the subject matter in a way that you make something that people find interesting now, but also people 30 years from now find it interesting. So that's the first half of the book. And then the last half of the book is, how do you then market that book and get it out there so that it gets into the hands of the people who should be reading it? And I read this book last year. Was it last year? It was last year. I read it. I took notes. I learned a lot, and I'm just flipping through it now as we're having this discussion, and I'm seeing all these marketing ideas and not ideas, but like philosophies and approaches where I'm just like, oh yeah, I got to remember to do that. I got to do that. And so I recommend that. It's it all applies to anybody who makes any type of work. He particularly, Ryan Holiday, doesn't do children's books, doesn't do comics or anything like that, but I still read through it with looking at it through that lens of how can this apply to me, and there's still a lot of there for artists like ourselves to glean from.
Awesome. I want to end this segment, since it's my podcast. I can just say that, right? I'm going to end the segment.
Yeah, you're in charge, Will.
I do have one thing to add. So should I add it before you do your?
Do you want to go ahead, Lee?
Well, if you want to, yeah, I'll just add one more little thing, because Jake reminded me of it. I just want to piggyback on that. Is if you get invited to speak, whether it's at a school or whether it's at a bookstore or whatever, have some kind of topic that you're trying to make the reader leave with. And the reason I say that is because at my graduate school, we had the way that they structured the whole program was just hearing tons and tons of artists speak, which sounds like it would be a good thing. But the problem is a lot of artists don't know how to speak. They would come and they would just show their work, and an image would come up on the screen. And they'd say, oh, here's an image I made, and it was fine. Here's another image I made, and oh man, this one took a long time. And then, I mean, it was nothing. At the end of it, I'd be like, I can get that much just by looking at their website. They didn't say anything. The good kind of talks are, here's how I use value in my work, or here's how I drive a story forward using character design, or some kind of specific topic that then a series of images fall under to reinforce that topic. And all of a sudden the whole thing writes itself, and it becomes so easy to do these kind of talks. Another thing to go along with that is if you tell stories about yourself, as humans, we're interested in each other. Especially if if you're forced to sit there because you're at a conference and you're going to be listening to this person, you want to know about them. And one of the mistakes that people make is they don't share personal anecdotes about how they became to be standing in front of you, of the group. And so the best talk that I ever gave, I feel, was this last fall, where I spoke to almost 300 librarians, and it was in a ballroom. It was at a resort. And I had been writing this talk because I knew I had to give it I think they contacted me 9 months before I gave the talk. So I had a lot of time, and I kept a Google Doc. And this is actually was therapeutic in not panicking that I had to give this talk either. Like, it never crept up on me, and I look forward to it. Because I was able to, anytime an idea popped in my head, I'd just jump on my phone, get in the Google Doc, and just jot down an idea that I wanted to include. And when I sat down to write the talk, like you said, Lee, it just kind of wrote itself. And
Wait, how long were you doing that for?
How long was the talk? Or how long was I?
No, how long were you preparing?
Like 9 months. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
But I mean, I was just writing down, like, some months I probably didn't write anything. And then just when an idea would pop in of what I wanted to. So basically what I wanted to do with these librarians is paint the picture that I was that kid. And I actually used those words. I said in the beginning, well, the first thing I did was I shared a really funny picture. And because it's a podcast, I'll have to just describe it. But I show my sister, because they're all librarians, they get school stuff. And my sister teaches second grade, and a kid came into her class at Halloween where the mom had made made the kid into a gumball machine. It was a little boy, and he became a gumball machine, and they had complete with gumballs in there that he could send out through the little the traditional, the old ones with the little latch at the bottom where the gumballs pop out of. The problem is the way she designed it, the little latch was right there at his groin. And my sister snapped a picture of a girl reaching in to get the gumball. You can't make this up. And the picture tells 1,000 words. And so I have started probably 3 or 4 talks with this image. And I just tell them, this has nothing to do with my talk. I'll tell them where the picture came from, that it's my sister that snapped it and blah, blah, blah. And I'll say, this has nothing to do with the talk. I just wanted to start out with a laugh, and they're dying laugh. They're crying, laughing, looking at this thing. And it makes it so much easier because now they're with you, And so I would start to talk there. But then I went into, I'm that kid who didn't do well in school. The kid who probably is bugging you right now and you hope that he's absent, and right away that endeared them, like, okay, so we're listening to, because I'm showing, images of my illustrations, and they're like, okay, so there is hope for these. And that was my message basically is, don't write off these kids that are, problems, because some of them are really creative and they're not being challenged, or they're not being rewarded for their creative contributions because they're kind of forced into the school system. And we kind of went down those roads, and I gave a talk for an hour, and it was easy, super easy. But I couldn't have done that when I first started. To me, the answer is you don't have to be great at speaking. Like, I've given so many horrible talks that, it's like anything though. If you do it a lot, you're going to get good at anything you do a lot, but it really can help you. Oh, and the other thing is I sold a ton of books there. I sold like 300 or 400 books at that conference. And the people, when I first got there, they didn't know who I was. A few of them knew who I was, but I'm not a big shot in the children's book world. And so, they're like, well, this is the guy that's coming to speak. After that talk, they ran to get in my book signing line.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
That's really good.
Okay.
I feel like that could have been our entire podcast. Then we could shift into, here's how you do public speaking.
Let's do that. Then we're done.
Always start.
I'm curious about the other talks, though. Yeah.
No, I think that one was longer. I think these other ones won't be quite as long. But
I don't know. With us 3 talking,
if we maybe we'll just do 2 if we run out of time. If you guys feel like the cool thing
what's next? Let's hear.
We don't have a boss. Have you guys realized that?
That's true.
Now I'm nervous.
We don't have to worry about anybody walking in. What are you 2 doing? 3. What are you 3 doing? Get back to work.
That last one was from Dan. I forgot to tell you. And this next one is from Shannon. And I've actually sat on this one for quite a while, wanting to work it in somewhere. It's a short little letter. I was thinking about the subject you brought up about men having so many issues drawing female characters. This was from one of our Third Thursday broadcasts that we did a long time ago. Not wanting to over-sexualize, but not being able to get a female across without relying on the typical tells of a female: long hair, large lips and hips, and of course a bust. You should do a segment on that. It is a legitimate problem male artists have, and it might go a long way to showing that even though SVS is all male, and she's talking about us 3 or we 3, they are highly respectful of women as powerful characters and plot devices in stories. So have you guys thought about that much, like how you draw women?
I'm not touching the subject. No, I in particular have a big problem with the way that women are depicted. And matter of fact, when we were at CTN, I probably told this story before on the podcast, but I went around and just took pictures of all the quote unquote sexy versions of all the characters in Disney. There's sexy Tarzan or sexy Jane. There's sexy Little Mermaid. I just have a huge problem with that. And in my opinion, I don't see a lot of people trying to get around that. I see a lot of people leaning into that. And it's infuriating to me just because I feel like it's such an easy shortcut, and it requires no thought. And then yet some of the times the people that do it, and I'm going to get myself in a lot of trouble here, the people that do it then get famous for it, and they have like 1 million followers on Instagram. And so I don't know. It's
this week, and I'm not going to name the artist. I don't know if either one. I think I mentioned it to you, Jake. Yeah. There's an artist who draws the super sexualized women, and he got taken out to the woodshed on social media this week. One of his characters was, and if you've seen this, you probably know what I'm talking about, bent over a table, and it looked like kind of like an anatomy exam going on in the winter regions. And that has always bothered me. I've never, I mean, part of it is my faith. I don't want to go that direction at all. I've never wanted to go down that road, but to each his own. But I've also wondered if that would come back to haunt people, and it looked like it really did this week.
What was the problem? I mean, the problem is that it was just overtly too far that way, or
anatomical drawing with a leotard over top of it.
Oh, man.
So
I just don't understand the draw to try to no pun intended, the draw to draw that. I don't understand the desire to just keep drawing the same thing like that. It's just such low hanging fruit. And it seems like after somebody's drawn enough of those that they'd be like, okay, I've kind of done that. Now I'm going to draw some other stuff. But man, that seems like there's just an endless appetite for it from consumers and artists as well. And I just have a big problem with it.
Well, in the children's book world, let's apply it to that. Obviously, if you're illustrating children's books, it's your target audience isn't the Comic-Con scene. But I don't think that any of us have ever illustrated any books where sexualizing a kid was even a thought. But how do you handle? What are the subtle things that you specifically would do to indicate a girl or a boy?
Yeah. So, I just want to talk really quickly about my approach, because I draw female characters like in comics and stuff like that. And my whole thing is I have a mom, I have sisters, I have a wife, and I have a daughter. And I don't want to draw anything that would disrespect them, right? And so basically my approach is if I'd be okay with any one of those people in my life wearing this outfit, then it's okay for me to draw. And if
that's
I wouldn't
pretty good test.
Yeah. And so that's usually where I go. And that doesn't mean to shy away from the female figure. But don't forget that the female figure isn't one figure; it's 100 different figures, right? And so, so I usually approach it as, who is this character, and what does she need to accomplish, and what about her image is going to back up her personality, back up her, support her personality, support the needs of the story, and that's the way I go for it. I don't start with, okay, she needs to be like a sexy babe, and let's go from there and work our way down to what her personality is. I usually start with what's the personality, and then work my way, basically from the inside out. Now, going to the question, like, how do you draw a female and make her look feminine without looking sexualized? With drawing children, it's super easy. For me, I just usually beef up the eyelashes a little more
on the boy,
and then typically no on the girl, and then I usually put her in clothes that I would see the girls. When I drop off my kids at school, I pay attention to what are the boys wearing, what are the girls wearing, what looks female, what looks male, and I'll dress them accordingly. And if it's if it's an older, if it's a woman character, then some of the more body features come in, where she will have excuse me, she will have hips, she'll have a chest. She won't have quite as broad shoulders. She'll any basically genetic marker that says this is a female and not a male. That's what I'll try to caricature and put into my comic designs.
Cool.
We had a great figure drawing class when I was in school, and I remember this really clearly because it was so interesting to me, where we had a male and a female model, and then they both would take the same pose. And what we focused on was getting away from the typical anatomy of female versus male, just the obvious hit points, and focusing on the more subtle things, like the way, like if a man is standing just in a neutral pose, just standing straight toward you, their arms typically round to the outside. But a woman standing in that same position, typically their elbows will go in and the lower arms will go out. And it's a distinctly different silhouette just in the way that the arms hang. And every single pose they did, there was some kind of more subtle version of the separation of how a male carries weight and how a woman carries weight and balance and all that stuff. And so if you can lean on those other things besides just the hit points of the sexy female, then it becomes a lot more believable, in my opinion. And then you don't need to rely on that overt stuff.
I've noticed also that when kids are young, and I haven't had young kids for a while, so Jake, you and Lee can probably give me a better understanding. But there's a time when they're, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, where boys and girls' bodies are really similar. Isn't that true? Like, mm-hmm. I mean, like if their hairstyle, if a boy grows long hair, you might mistake him for a girl.
I think pre-puberty, I think that's for sure.
So when I'm drawing kids, like you said, I think you said, Jake, I'm looking for eyelashes, and I'm actually looking to make the boys a little more square, probably a little bit more, little harsher angles than even they would have at the age they are, just so that I can have that contrast with the females being a little more rounder. That's kind of how I do it.
Yeah. The main thing to do though is just put a bow on the girls. Make sure it's pink with polka dots. High heel, like big round high heel shoes, and you're good to go. Oh. And then with the boys,
baseball logo
shorts with. Yeah.
Well, the elephant in the room is this is a political topic right now. And without going political on it, as illustrators, we are faced with drawing all kinds of different characters. That's the reality. You're going to get an assignment to draw a female character, a male character, young, old, animals, female animals, male animals. And there are subtle differences. There are cues when you're walking down the street, your brain, whether you like it or not, is telling you that is a male, that is a female. Sometimes you get it wrong, but your initial reaction is you can't turn off your perceptions, right? Your brain is giving you information and you're trying to deal with it. You're trying to figure it out. And as an illustrator, you have to put that down on paper. You have to come up with a look for your characters. And if it's a female character, then it needs to look like a female. And if it's a male character, it needs to look like a female. And there's a lot of crossover too. There's a lot of female characters that have a lot of more masculine, traditionally masculine characteristics, and probably vice versa. And so I think you mentioned this, Jake, you really have to be respectful of that particular character, of trying to portray that character the best you possibly can.
Mm-hmm. I had one children's book assignment come through, and it was about these school children who are learning all about apples, and they go through, it's basically an alphabet book, but every letter had something to do with apples. And there really was no story. It's just that each image was this group of school children interacting with, an apple orchard, or making apples or picking apples or something like that. And I just wanted to avoid the whole mess of, do I make the girls look girly? Do I make the boys look boyish? Do I, do I make sure how many races are represented? Do I make sure everything's like PC and perfect? And I said, you know what? What if I made animals instead?
That is a great technique.
And so I turned them all into animals, and we had pigs and bears and foxes and rabbits. And what was cool is that actually I got to play with the story a little bit more than I think I would have. Like, one of the through lines was the pig gets to eat whatever he wants, and the bear is like on a diet, and so the bear would want to eat donuts but instead be handed an apple, and it was fun. It was a much, I don't know, I made some portfolio pieces from that one because the opportunity to caricature the animals and just the illustrations that came from it were way more fun and interesting and playful and kid friendly than had I actually drawn kids.
I'm doing the exact same thing in the book I'm doing right now. So it's a proven technique. Don't ever draw people again.
Yep.
I mean, most of the stories that I've illustrated have animals, so I haven't had to deal with this a whole lot. But yeah, it's hard because we all want the books that we read to reflect us and look like us, the characters, and that's tough because we all look different, right? So,
that's right.
All right, I'm going to jump out of this one. I think we've hit that one. The last one is, I really enjoyed this session. So this was from another of our, I believe it was a third Thursday. What I found most interesting was the comments on technique versus content. So craft versus concept. I would put that, the idea of your illustration versus the technique that you're using. And so this person says they would love to see a discussion on what makes an image emotional. I feel I tend to overcomplicate or focus on rendering while missing the emotion. I'd love to see more of the early compositions, blah, blah, blah. Also, any thoughts on your process concerning rework and visiting how you plan this as a workflow? So I want to start on this one and just say that I just finished a class on our SVSLearn with Brian Ajar. I always want to, I learned his name wrong and I can't get it out of my brain. I say it Ajar, but he's very quick to correct me and say Ajar, like it's a jar of peaches or something. And one of the things that struck me in there, the students did amazing work. But one of the things I noticed that they were very weak on was coming up with a good story for their illustration. And they would come up with what I would call a story fragment. And this is going to tie into emotion. But they would say, well, I want the idea for this one is that this person is looking off to the side. That's the story, is a person looking over their shoulder.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay. And Brian was the same way. He's like, okay, so, but why are they looking over their shoulder? Is there something happening back there? Or they would put little things in there that would confuse us, and we would look at the illustration and to give it a critique, and we wouldn't know what they were trying to say. And so I think for me, the first part of conveying emotion in your piece is having a complete story idea. Now you can overdo that and try to tell too much story in one image, but it needs to be a clear illustration. So an example of a good story would be someone's walking down the stairs and they're holding a huge birthday cake. And you see on the stair some child's blocks or a roller skate or a ball or something that they're about to step on. Okay. That is a story idea. And you could show that story in the beginning, middle, or end. You could show they're about to step on the toy. You could show them stepping on the toy, slipping, the cake going up in the air. Or you could show the aftermath with the skate next to them. And looking at it, you could completely figure out what the illustration is about. And so for me, if you're going to convey a complex human emotion or make your piece feel emotional, get someone to relate to it, you have to tell a story that people have experienced. Almost everyone has slipped and fallen down the stairs at one point, right? So So we
For
know
sure.
we know what just yesterday. So we can, but we can't relate to a story fragment of someone just kind of looking. Okay, well then you're asking more questions than you're answering. So that would be my first thing. What do you guys think?
Me and David are teaching illustration class right now, and one of the big things that we, David Hone, one of the things that we require of the students is they have to put kind of if it's a series of text or around a story, they have to put the significant portion of that on the sketch, and then there has to be keywords there because I need to know the intent of the piece. And I think too often if students haven't trained this way or just kind of drawn without thinking, there is no intent. And so David and I judge the success of the piece by the fact that does it hit the intent, does it hit the keywords, or does it not? And if it doesn't, that's how we frame the whole critique. Is you're saying you want this to be scary, but it doesn't look scary, and let's talk about why. And then we start going through, the design of the piece, the gestures of the piece, the characters that are in there, and all the other supporting cast. But without knowing that intent, there's no driving force.
Yep.
I think to learn how to tell a joke, right? Not even just create a joke out of thin air, but go find jokes and learn how to tell them. Learn the setup, learn the meat of the joke, and then learn how to deliver the payoff. And so much is going on there. Jokes are just mini stories, and then that stuff. The more you do that, the more that translates to your work, and you're not satisfied just drawing a character looking to the left. You're wanting to know what's driving that character. What, are they looking behind them because something's coming up to get them? Or are they looking behind them because something that they've been longing for is finally there or is never going to be there? The main thing is a joke teaches you how to establish a character, establish a problem, establish a situation or an environment that character's in, and then how that problem's solved in a clever, funny way, and all the elements are there in a short joke that apply to illustrating, to a children's book, to comic books, even to like bring it back to the beginning to public speaking, right? All of that applies. And the reason for illustration and what separates illustration apart from just art, from just drawings, is illustration tells stories. And so everything you draw should be one of these parts of the story. It should be the setup, it should be the meat, it should be the payoff. One of those things, every illustration should be something of that, and leave the person looking at it asking what next or what just happened.
A good example in our class was, and this was an illustration that was actually really good, but it could have been just taken a little bit further. And it was the idea. So I have them write the little sentence or two of what they're trying to hit as well. And the verbiage at the bottom was two girls gossiping about another girl, which is totally a scenario, and I think all of us have been gossiped about. And you got that when you looked at the illustration. You saw one girl looking kind of very uncomfortable in the foreground, and then two girls kind of whispering to each other, looking at her. And so it communicated, but we felt like it wasn't taken far enough. Like why are they gossiping about her? And I don't know. It's hard for me to put a definition on how far to take something, but to me, and there will be text, there will be illustrations in a book where you probably don't want to go quite as far. But as soon as we added a piece of toilet paper to the bottom of the girl in the foreground shoe, it became a clearer idea,
Nice.
Because we've all toilet paper stuck at the bottom of our shoe. And then when you see that and you realize that, you look around to see who's looked at you. There's two people, laughing and commenting right there. So it felt like it was more of a complete story. So for me to get that emotion, to get someone to relate, it has to go all the way through a scenario of what most people have experienced in their life personally. So there you go.
I like it. Okay.
We should mark that moment. That's the first moment of silence in 20 episodes.
Paper, did that throw you guys off?
I thought you were in charge of this episode, Will.
Yeah, we thought it was going to be another go-to, another little snippet. We don't know. We're just following along.
That's right. You don't have notes today. Well, we've got 3 down. Nothing. We've got 10 more to go.
Oh, gosh.
No, we're done.
We have a natural capacity for 1 hour conversation. I've noticed, because we don't plan these, you guys. You might think that we know exactly where the time's going and we got to wrap it up. We don't. It's just but they almost always are right around an hour. Have you guys noticed that?
Yeah. That is about all I can take of you two.
Sick of you guys. We are such talkers, though. I mean, when we all went to CTN and me and Will shared a place, me and Will had such great conversation, but I think we both talked for 4 days straight.
And then right at the beach on Venice Beach.
That was awesome.
CTN, that was Adobe Max.
Oh, yeah. That's right. That was Adobe Max. Sorry, Adobe.
Yeah. Are we going to do that again this year?
Heck yeah.
Jake
Why not?
Out on the beach cruisers.
Why not? Well, we'll see. Maybe I'll do less stuff this year so I can join you guys more. That'd be nice. All right. Now, this podcast has devolved into us planning the year.
Just talk shop about this. So we got to get some stuff figured out.
No. I'll wrap it up. I'll wrap this podcast up. Let me find my notes here. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Will, for this topic. Basically, we just helped you answer your email. So I think that's going to be my topic next time. I got some emails here, guys. How should I respond to this? Okay, 3-Point Perspective is made possible by SVSLearn.com. That's who's paying the bills here, who's paying for the editing, for all of the work that Tanner does. SVS is your source for learning illustration and how to become a better illustrator. We all teach classes there, not just us, but we have 20 different instructors throughout all the courses teaching different classes. You could sign up, you could subscribe for the price of going out to dinner twice in a month and get knowledge that lasts with you for the rest of your life. So check out svslearn.com. And let me tell you who we are if this is your first time listening to us. Will Terry was that sultry baritone that guided us through the episode today. Will Terry can be found. His artwork can be found at Will Terry Art on Instagram and willterry.com for his website. Lee White, our beautiful tenor, bouncing ideas back to Will. Lee White can be found on Instagram at Lee White Illo, and his website is leewhiteillustration.com. And I'm Jake Parker. I can be found on Instagram at Jake Parker, and my website is mrjakeparker.com. Go there and you can see my artwork there. Podcast is edited by Alex Sugg. Check out his work at alexsugg.com. Show notes by Tanner Garlick. You can find his work at tannergarlickart.com. And if you like this episode, please share it around. You could subscribe to us on iTunes or whatever platform you like to listen to podcasts on. Wherever you do subscribe, please leave a review. Let us know what you think. We love reading the comments. We love the feedback. It helps us make this podcast better. If you're wanting to join in on this particular discussion, you have answers that we did not provide, go and join the discussion on the svslearn.com forums. They're completely free to join. It's a beautiful community going on there. And we've posted this episode in its own thread, so you can chime in over there and let us know your thoughts. All right, everybody. Thank you, and we will talk to you next time.